So let's now learn how to use icons in our design using HTML and CSS. So, as we just learned, the first thing that we need to do when we want to work with icons is to actually choose an icon pack. Now, as I said, there are many free icon packs available. And in this project, we are going to use these ones here, so-called hero icons, which are available at heroicons.com. And the link, as always, can also be found on my resources page. Now, as it says here, this is a pack of SVG icons. So just as I mentioned also in the last lecture, SVG is a format that can scale indefinitely, and so SVG icons are always a good choice. So you see that this pack consists of 230 icons, and it contains both icons with the outline style and then also the same icons but in a solid style. So for example here, this annotation icon, here is what it looks like just with lines, and here is the solid version. And that's even easier to see with these ones here. So if you compare them, it's very apparent that the solid one looks quite different than the outline one. And these different styles have different places in different designs, so just as we learned also in the last lecture. Now, if we analyze these icons, we see that they are actually quite round. So while the typography that we have here on our page is actually a bit boxy or squared, so it's not really rounded, but these icons are quite simple to use, and so that's the main reason why I'm using them now for this project. So it's mainly for demonstration purposes, even though these icons might not be the perfect fit in terms of design. But actually, as you will see, they do actually still look quite good. All right. Now, in practice, there are multiple ways of using SVG icons in HTML. One of them is to download actual SVG files and then incorporate them into the HTML, just like regular images. However, that has a couple of limitations, and so the easiest way is to actually just copy the SVG code. And that works because, well, SVG is actually just code. So it's actually a similar specification to HTML, but basically to describe designs. So I'm not going to go into what SVG actually is. We just want to use it here. And so the first thing that we want to do now is to create some feature blocks here. So right here. So remember how I said that probably the most common use case for icons is to create feature blocks. So where we have an icon, like here at the top, then some heading and then some description. And so that's exactly what we will do now. So this first one here is about science. So let's look for an icon that basically describes science. And here on this side, we can actually search science. And so this one actually looks quite nice. So let's click here on copy SVG. All right. Then in our HTML, and now the window is very narrow, but we can still see it, I think. So here we have this container, which is the grid 3 calls, which is all of this here. And then we have 3 divs, and each of them is now a feature, right? So here we have this title, and then in there we have the actual text. And so let's put the icon first before this title right here. Paste it. And so this is what the SVG code looks like for that particular icon. Give it a save. And there it is. And of course, that's completely oversized. And so we can actually now go ahead and format this SVG icon using CSS. So let's give it a nice class. It comes with this default here, which is not really useful. So let's call it feature icon. Okay. And this class needs to be right here inside of the SVG element. So again, as I mentioned, SVG is basically just a way of describing graphical elements such like this icon here. So SVG is still an element in HTML, and it has an opening tag and a closing tag. And inside of it, in this case, is a path element, which has like all of these coordinates, which describe exactly what this icon should look like. All right. Of course, we never write these by hand, so we just copied this icon from our icon pack. Great, but anyway, let's now use this class that we added to this SVG element just like any other element, right? And so now let's go here to our CSS. Let's add that, yeah, here close to the features. Oh, and actually I already had the selector here, so that's helpful. And so now let's start by defining the color. And for that, we use the stroke property and then our color. And that's it. Give it a save. And that didn't change a thing. So let's see what's wrong. So features icon, maybe I wrote that wrong. Oh yeah, here I have feature, but I want it to be called features icon. And now it is green. Nice. But of course it's way too big. Now here actually in the description of these icons, it tells us right away that this is designed to be rendered at 24 by 24 pixels. All right. So as I mentioned by the end of the last lecture, some icons are designed to be used in a small setting. And these icons are one of those. So let's start by using 24 by 24. And we simply do that just like any other element. So width, 24 pixels, and height, also 24 pixels. All right. Now this looks actually really, really small. And so maybe we can push that a little bit to like 32 pixels. And so I think that this still looks nice. It doesn't look like the example I showed you in the last lecture. Now, if we were to use something like 50 pixels, then we would see that effect where the line suddenly becomes way too thick, right? So now it does no longer look good here. So we definitely need to make it smaller. But 32, I think, still looks fine. We also need to use some common sense and compare it, for example, here with the width of these characters. And so, yeah, that looks acceptable to me. Let's just also add some margin bottom here. Let's say 16 pixels. So that's okay for now, but we will talk about visual hierarchy a little bit later, and then we will adjust all the margins, so all the spacing all over the page. Now, we could also have used that technique where we would enclose this icon into some kind of circle with a green background color. But since this is a very simple design, I think that that would actually add a little bit too much visual clutter to this design. So let's not do that and instead do it in our next big project. All right. But anyway, let's now find an icon for this one and for this one here as well. And well, as I mentioned also by the end of last lecture, this is not always very easy. So an icon pack like this with only 230 icons is of course a little bit limited and cannot have icons for every single situation that we want. So I've searched in this icon pack here a lot, and I will not spend a ton of time now discussing the different options. I will just use here for comfort an icon that is called happy. So this one. All right. So this one, I think, still kind of conveys the message of comfort. And so let's just use that. So let's go here to our next one. Right here. And then the class should be features, well, not cyan or whatever that was. And yeah, nice. And now this one here, ethical and sustainable. So let's like use a heart, which is something that many pages use for this kind of messaging. And over time, with experience, you will of course then start to get a feeling of what icon is right for what situation. So just like everything else, this is really also a matter of experience. So this should be our heart. And so features icon, and beautiful. That looks really nice. So these icons here, they make a lot of difference if you ask me. It's a really nice touch. And so now once the user reaches this section here, it just makes the whole content a little bit easier to digest and just easier to look at too. Great. So here we created 3 feature blocks using icons. And now let's use one of the other big applications of icons, which is to simply provide visual assistance to text. So here we have these, as we call them, cards. So basically a component which has an image and a description and then some like bullet points, as we could say. So short descriptions of features of products. And then down here also a button and a price. So this is a typical card in like a shop. And it's also very common to add an icon to each of these text descriptions right here. So one describing like leisure, one describing for how long it is comfortable, then saying that they use vegan and organic materials, and finally also the weight. So let's try to use an icon for each of these to make this content a little bit easier to digest and easier to scan as well. So again, I have already searched through these icons, and for the first one, there's not really a really good fit. But again, I really wanted to use this icon pack because it's so easy to use, and therefore that was my main focus, even though if the icons were not perfect. So here I'm going to use this icon called Sparkles. So let's go down here. Here it is already, right? And so here each of these lines here is inside of a list. So this unordered list, and then each of them is a list element. But I used CSS to remove the bullet points from this list. That's why we cannot see them there. So inside of each list item, let's now paste the icon. And there it is already. And so this is also the reason why we then have this span element here. So that basically all the content is inside of an element. So we have the icon inside of an SVG, and then besides that, we have the text inside a span element, which remember is a generic inline element, a little bit like divs for block level elements. All right. So let's also add a class to these ones. And I'm calling these ones chair icon. Okay. So that's the features icon, and down here, yeah, I already have the selector for the chair icon. So let's start again with the color. And so for that, remember we use the stroke property and set it to this color. Now, if you were to use these solid icons here, then instead of using the stroke property, you would actually need the fill property. All right. So those are 2 different options when you want to style the color of an SVG icon. And actually we can still try that in this icon here. So let's just see what happens if we define the fill. Let's just put it to red. And then the icon is suddenly filled, so with our red color. All right. But now let's change the size here. And these ones, let's actually make them 24 pixels. So basically the size for which they were designed. And that looks quite nice. Okay. And so our styles are now done. All we need to do is to find the icons and display them there. So here, in this one here, we are telling the customer for how long the chair is comfortable. So that sounds like we want to display a clock there. Right. So the clock will then quickly tell the user that it is something related to time. Then we just need to add our class chair icon. All right. Next up, we have like this vegan and organic materials, which basically means that we want to care about the environment, right? So for that, we can use this earth icon. Yeah, so actually it's this one called globe. So let's copy that. Call it the chair icon. Nice. That's beautiful. And finally here we want the weight of a box. So let's use something which looks like a box. So box. But this one here, well, somehow doesn't look really appealing. It really looks more like an archive, which is the name here also of the icon. So let's try cube. And that one looks a lot better. So copy SVG. But of course I know this because I already designed this beforehand. So if you were designing this yourself, you would probably have to go through this whole list of icons and decide between all of them what fits best according to your message. But since that takes a lot of time, I already did that here beforehand, of course. So chair icon, and there you go. So this looks a lot better here than this one, right? So again, we added some nice little touch here, both visually and also to actually make it easier to scan the content, all by using 4 simple icons. So that's really cool. And so now all we need to do is to copy these to this card and to this one here as well. So let me now actually show you a very nice trick that we can use in VS Code, which is to use multiple cursors. And I'm going to start by doing that in a very small example. So let's say I wanted to select 2 different words. So let's say this one, block quote. And now on my keyboard, I can hit the Alt key or Option on a Mac, and I can select another word. Let's say like this. And so right now you see that we have 2 blinking cursors here, right? And now I can copy this. So I just copied. And let's say I wanted to paste these 2 somewhere. So maybe actually just here. Or actually, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So, well, let's say just here and maybe here. And so to add now another cursor, I can again hit the Option key or the Alt key. So just like this. And so now again, I have 2 cursors. And so if I now paste what I selected earlier, then these 2 words appear exactly where we had these 2 cursors. And I can actually now do things with these 2 cursors at the same time. So I can add a space here, and I can move around the text and do everything in multiple places. So that's going to be very helpful to copy these icons here, not one by one, but all at once. So let's select all of them. So the first one is this, and all the way until the end of the SVG. So that's the first one. And now, again, I will hit the Alt or Option key before I click here again and select all of this. So you see that now we have this one selected and this one. And now let's do it again. And don't forget to hit the Alt or Option key before clicking here. Otherwise, you will lose your other selections. Okay, so 3. And again, so 1, 2, 3, 4 selections. And now copy it. And now down here, we just need to go to the places where we want the icons to be. So that's here. And now again, Alt, and here, and here, and here, right? And so now, paste, and save, and there it is. So very simple way of copying everything at the same time, which saves us a lot of time. And so now we can just do it again right here. So here, and here, and here, and here, paste it, save it, and there you go. Now, if you didn't manage to do it like this, of course, you can also copy them one by one individually. But this is a trick that I use all the time when I'm using VS Code. Okay. And so that's how you use icons in your designs, following the rules that I described earlier. So we used a nice icon pack with SVG icons. We used them in two different situations to create feature blocks and to provide visual assistance to text down here. We didn't make the icons too big, and also we tried to choose icons that actually make sense, which in most of the cases, I think we actually achieved. Awesome. So with that, you mastered yet another very important ingredient of great web design. And so now let's move on together to the next one, which is shadows. So see you there very soon.